where you live, and it's good to see some Love Where You Live shirts out and about this morning. I do want to say we have a few extras still available, and if you want to see Becky after service, she can see if we have the size that you would like. And I'll say this, if there's enough interest in ordering more shirts, we'll take a look at that as well. Curious this morning, how many of you have ever been involved in a car accident? Been involved in a car accident? How many of you were driving? It's good to know. Pay attention to those that are How many of you have been in more than one accident while driving? Again, we want to pay attention. Think about this. About how far from home did that accident or those accidents happen? You think about it for a little bit. How many of you, your accident happened farther than 50 miles away? Farther than 50 miles away? I see one hand, maybe a couple hands. Okay, like thinking, like, well, which one? Or I don't know. Okay. How many of you, your accident happened within 25 miles of home? How many of your accident happened within 10 miles of home? Which one? Okay, one of your accidents happened within 10 miles of home. Researchers, and I think this came from an insurance agency, would tell us that 83% of auto accidents happen within 20 miles of your home. Within 20 miles. Now when we gathered together, and I remember back in the day when we would go on vacation, you know, back in the day when, and some of you don't even remember this back in the day, but back in the day when they didn't have seatbelts in the back seat, or at least you didn't worry about seatbelts in the back seat, and if you had a sedan and you had more than one child, like my family did growing up, like one child gets the seat to lay down on a longer trip, the other child can maybe get the back window area, you know what I'm talking about? And then usually the youngest gets to sleep on the floorboard. And if there's more than three, there wasn't in our case, but if there's more than three, then you get like one floorboard and the other floorboard. And you just have to, you make do, and that was the way it was. But we would gather together, and usually, not always, but most of the time, when we were going to be traveling for 100 miles or farther than that, going to grandma's house or something, and maybe 300 miles, there would be a family prayer, right? Lord, and what's the prayer? Keep us safe. Lord, give us traveling mercies. If I was to just kind of go by what I read here and the research that's been provided and the hands that went up, there are people that need to be praying for you for traveling mercies every day. That you go to work or something, right? I mean, you're more likely to get in an accident going to work or going to get groceries than you are going to grandma's house 300 miles away. Why is it? Well, I think there's probably two reasons. One is the law of averages. You're around your house more. Right? The other thing is associated to that. And so just the law of averages, there's more opportunities for you to get in an accident, to hit another vehicle, or like on Friday, I took a few people and we went over for the inaugural regional conference or district conference for the Great Lakes region, and we passed, there were a couple different accidents that we passed, and it was in Holland, Michigan, and we passed a few. But we didn't have any close calls, 150 miles, 180 miles from home. The closest call that we had was about 5 miles from here, when there were like 5 deer that were out on the road, and it was just that time of night, and I almost smoked one of them. Not like this. But the law of averages, we're around this area, you're around your home more, and so you're just more likely, if you get in an accident, that's where you're more likely to do it because of the law of averages. But also there's what I'm going to call the law of familiarity. I know this area. Where when you're driving 300, 400, 500 miles from home, you're usually more alert, you're paying more attention. I don't really know that area, and so I'm paying more attention to my surroundings. You're a lot less likely to be fidgeting and trying to change, the song on your iPhone to play a different song, or texting or calling or something. You might be messing with the GPS, but you're much more likely to be paying attention to what's going on in your surroundings than you are when you're closer to the surroundings that you're more comfortable with, and you are more familiar with, and therefore you let your guard down. And you're not alert, you're not paying attention, you're not intentionally keeping your eyes on the road and looking at your surroundings. You take for granted that this is going to be okay, and that's going to be okay, and I know exactly where I'm going, and so you just kind of relax. And when it comes to loving where you live, and let's go to our theme verse, shall we? It's at the top of your notes. It says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." And there are a lot of times where, as a church, and even pastors probably are some of the most guilty of what I'm going to talk about today. Pastors can be some of the most guilty ones of saying, we need to love one another. We need to love those outside of the home. And so pastors can be consumed with making sure that they put on their best face or whatever and treat others the best. And I want to make sure that my congregation knows that they're loved. And I want to make sure that the community, and we're going to talk a lot about loving our community as part of loving where you live. And we talk about, hey, we got to show the love of Jesus. They're going to know that we're His disciples by our love for them. But we neglect those whom we share a home with, those that we live with. And we become too familiar, so familiar that we take one another for granted. We just kind of, we know that they know us and that they know how we are, and so we feel like that's almost an excuse to not treat them the way that we would treat others. And the ones that probably were to ask ourselves, or if we were to be asked, who do you love the most? It's my family, my spouse, my kids. Sadly, it's oftentimes the case that those are the ones that feel loved the least. And because there's a tension that we need to give some attention to, and here's the tension that I think we face. You often cause the most hurt to those you're with the most. And oftentimes it's those that we share a home with, share a house with. Because of the law of averages. They're around us more. They're around us more often, and so they're more likely to catch us when we're having a bad day. They're more likely to catch us when we just woke up and we got up on the wrong side of the bed. I never really did understand that saying, by the way. You need to get up on the other side. It's really going to make a difference? I don't know. Anybody ever try it? I don't think it makes it, but for some reason, we kind of give ourselves an excuse and a pass, and I'm just having one of those bad days, and they'll get over it, and they'll be okay. And we end up hurting those the most that are the closest to us, and actually the ones that we would say we love the most. Sometimes the ones that receive our love the least. And so how do we look at correcting that? And I'm going to take a look at 1 John chapter 3. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. We're not going to spend too long there. We're going to be jumping around again today anyway. But if we go back to 1 John chapter 3, beginning with verse 11, it says, "This is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. John is going back. John's heard Jesus talk many times about loving one another, knew the command to love one another. And then he says this, he says, do not be like Cain, who, and then a little bit of explanation in that, and then said this, murdered his brother. And if you're new to the church, you've been in the church for a long time, most people have heard the story of Cain and Abel. If not, you can go back to the book of Genesis, somewhere around chapter 4, chapter 5, somewhere in there, and you can read about the story of Cain and Abel, and one brother that brought a sacrifice to the Lord, and another brother that brought a sacrifice to the Lord, or an offering to the Lord, and one was received and one was not. And the one that wasn't, Cain, got jealous and he killed his brother. So, love one another, don't be like Cain. And I think probably most of us are going, okay, I won't be like Cain. I won't murder my brother. Or, as we talk about loving in the home and making sure that love is in the house, not just our brothers and sisters, but our spouse, our children, our parents. You say, well, I don't hate them. I'm not going to murder them. I'm not going to go that far. Well, let's take it back. And how do we, instead of doing the opposite, and not just going, okay, I'm not going to do the least, I won't murder them. I mean, that's like bottom line. I mean, how low do you have to go to be able to like cross that barrier, right? I mean, that's not very high of a step to say, okay, I'm not going to murder them. But yet, we oftentimes, unintentionally, again, it's an accident a lot of times, in our home, oftentimes we have a tendency to kill them in different ways. By the words that we say, the things that we do, or the things that we don't do, the things that we say or the things that we don't say, and we cause grave, grave injury to those that we would say we love the most. The ones that we live with, the ones that we share a home or a house with. And so today I want to take a walk through, and some of you are very familiar with this, but here's our big idea, is to choose to intentionally fill your home with love. And we're going to look at the 5 love languages to do so. And some of you are saying, I've heard those before. Okay? And so I'm just going to call a time out and say, I don't care if you've heard them before. If I didn't think it was worth our time, your time, my time, to look at them even again, even if you've heard them multiple times, I wouldn't mess with it. But I believe this is the direction the Lord led me, first and foremost. Second of all, even as something that I have heard multiple times, something that I have led couples that are looking to get married, I walk them through the 5 love languages, and I've done that multiple times. And I've taught on this a few times. I still need, personally, I need reminders on all 5 of these to be intentional about filling my home with love. And so Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book several years ago on the 5 love languages, particularly related to spouses, and then he's since written some others. One in particular, he wrote about the 5 love languages for children, and then there's another one that went along that line with love languages for teens. We have some of those, and if you're interested in picking up a copy, you can see me afterwards, and I'd love to help you out with that. But I want to quickly highlight and walk through the different 5 love languages, and to understand that these are how basically we receive love, but it's also how we speak love, or how we tend to give love to others. And so there are times when, and we'll see this in the second one, I believe it is, where it's stated more as the one that's receiving, and so paying attention to how they feel loved. And Dr. Chapman would say most people have a kind of the top 2 primary love languages, is how he usually calls it, and then there's some others that you need a little more help with. Okay? There are those that you speak fluently, that's how you receive love, that's how you best feel love, and so likewise, that's how you best speak love. And sometimes we miss each other in that because we don't all have the same love languages. And I think instead of just focusing on one, because that's what your spouse's love language is or your child's love language is, to focus and to understand and to know all of them, because all of them are needed to fill the house or to fill the home with love. The first one is physical touch, and when I say physical touch, or even talk about love, in our society, love oftentimes gravitates to this idea of sex. And sadly, we've mistaken the idea, the concept, the reality of what love is for something that can be a wonderful piece of that, but many times has nothing to do with love. And then when I add in and I jump out physical touch, and I did this purposely because I want to just get it out of the way and say, okay, let's just understand what we're talking about when we're talking about physical touch and how to properly, safely express love for one another. Let's jump into Scripture once again. In Mark chapter 10, verse 16, speaking of Jesus, he says, "And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them." Researchers have gone and looked at especially those that, like orphanages, areas where children are not being raised in a regular biological home, and have done some research, and there are some orphanages that do really well. They have enough staff, they're well staffed, and they're able to provide regular physical contact to the children in their care. And so age appropriate, when the children are really young, when they're infant age, toddler age, they're held a lot, they're either carried around and things like that, they're pulled tight. Again, as they grow, appropriate contact and everything. And they see time and time again that those compared to those that are in orphanages where they're understaffed and they're under-cared for, they don't receive regular physical contact. There's a significant difference in the average emotional stability and academic or intelligence. They're much more developed in those places where they've had that physical touch. There's something about security. There's something about just being, okay, how many of you can remember back in the day when you were younger, and there were times when you just wanted daddy to hold you, or you just wanted mommy to hold you. And some of you might even be 70 years old, and you're going, I still want my mom to hold me. I still wish my dad could just kind of put his arm around me. There's something powerful about physical touch when it's done right. There's something powerful. Jesus understood that, and he took children in his arms, put his hands on them, and blessed them. Another passage of Scripture that I want us to see. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Now obviously the big wow in this story is the man is healed physically. That's wow, right? But to me, the thing that I don't want us to miss is that Jesus touched this man who had leprosy. And if you understand leprosy, they were seen as the untouchables. You don't touch them. Especially in that kind of a day in society, they didn't have a lot of hand sanitizer and stuff like that, where you could just quickly cleanse yourself and other precautions and rubber gloves or safety or whatever. Like, it was taboo. It was also not just taboo, but it was unsafe for Jesus to do that. But Jesus understood something about physical touch, and not just saying you're healed, but to say, hey, I love you. I'm not afraid to touch you. I care enough about you as a person that I'm going to let you know. And there's something that happens when there's a safe touch, the right touch, the proper touch. that is given. As we talk about physical touch, it's important, and maybe you've picked up on this along the line, but it's important to understand that there is a difference between what's safe and what's unsafe, what's proper and what's improper. Some of the hurt and some of the damage that's taken place is because of one, our spouse or our children haven't received the proper touch. We haven't let them know that we love them by giving them a little hug, a little pat on the back, pulling them in tight, maybe a little kiss on the forehead. If it's your spouse, a kiss on the cheek or a kiss on the lips. I'll just say right now, if you try to kiss me on the lips, and you're not my wife, there will be physical touch involved. I don't know how much love will be in that, but if you kiss me on the lips or try to kiss me on the lips, there will be physical touch involved. But to understand what's proper and what's not proper, and to know that there are people that don't want to be touched too much. And to give them space, especially if they're not your spouse or your child. And I'll just say this, parents of teenagers, probably on Tuesday morning, if you drive them to school, it probably would be best to not get out of the car and, come here, Steve, no, I'm just kidding, and give them a big hug, and I don't do that. Maybe give them a fist pump or something like that. But the right touch, and there is the wrong touch. Okay, and I don't want to go too far into that today, but just to understand the right touch and that there is a wrong touch. Whether it's done with too much force, okay? And I'm thinking, well, discipline or spanking. I'm not talking about spanking. Okay, now spanking can go wrong, but the wrong touch will hurt. Spanking hurts. When it's done right, it still hurts. Been there, done that. But it doesn't leave scars emotionally or physically. The wrong touch will leave scars either way or both and, physically and emotionally. So avoid that with those in your home, but also avoid that with those outside your home. Second one, so the first one, physical touch. Second one, words of affirmation. Words of affirmation. And so let's take a look at some words of affirmation and in the power of the tongue from Scripture. Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And we all know the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And we all know that that's complete garbage, right? We know that words do hurt. In fact, if I ask you to think back to times that somebody said something and it really pierced, it hurt. It won't take very long at all to think back to something that just really hurt, like devastated you. And here's the thing. Oftentimes, what was said that caused the pain, if we were to go back to that person, or maybe we go back to that person will say, I'm sorry, I never meant to say that. I didn't mean to say it that way. It was unintentional. But that's what happens in the home. You say things unintentionally, or in a way, unintentionally. We didn't mean it with that kind of a tone. It's just kind of the way it came out, and all of a sudden, we've caused damage. Sometimes it's just a fender bender, but sometimes it's a lot more than a fender bender. We can also think of times when we've heard somebody say something to us, and it made our day. It maybe even made your week. There's some of you, somebody said something to you, maybe even back in 5th grade, and what was said to you, almost maybe even, it wasn't like the sky opened up and God said it, but yet there was something about what was said that it like set you on your course of life, and it's giving you kind of a hope and this reason for living, and the ability to just continue to march forward, and you keep drawing on that. Like somebody believed in me. They said, hey, I think you're going to do great things. And you just keep drawing on that. And like the power of words are something that we can't overlook. Matthew chapter 3, verse 17. And a voice from heaven said, so this is God the Father, this is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. There's something I want us to understand. Words that communicate appreciation are always appreciated. Words that communicate appreciation, they're always appreciated. How many of you get tired of saying good job? How many of you get tired of hearing, hey, thanks for the meal, honey. That was really delicious. Hey, thanks for taking out the trash. I really appreciate that. I know that it makes you have to kind of work to get out a little earlier. I really appreciate that. Thanks, son. You're awesome. Anybody get tired of that? I think they're always appreciated. Always appreciated. And there are different ways that we can affirm one another. And I would encourage you, look to go deeper and beyond just appearance, or just something that's physical, or just what they do. Hey, you're a great soccer player. You're really good. Way to go, you scored a lot of points. Or this, because when they think that your love for them is just based on performance, that can create some hurt as well. So you let them know that you love them no matter what. You continually verbalize them. And here's another challenge that I will throw out to you. Look to communicate verbally, I love you, without using the word love. Look to communicate verbally, I love you, without saying the word love. There are different ways that you can do that. I appreciate, thankful for, and you guys can come up with a lot of different things. But look for ways that you can say I love you without actually using the word love. Now keep in mind, it's still a good practice to use the word love. Don't go away from that. But look for ways that you can use other words. The third one is acts of service. Acts of service. And we definitely see this modeled in Jesus as well. It says in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. It says, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. If you take a look at where that is found, it's John chapter 13 and 14, was just a little bit ahead of our theme verse for Love Where You Live. There's something in acts of service, serving one another, thinking of them, doing something for those that are in your home. And sometimes acts of service will intersect, and the other ones will intersect with one another, but acts of service can intersect with physical touch. If they're comfortable with it, if they're okay with it. Rubbing your spouse's feet after a long day of work. Active service, there's also physical touch. It can communicate love in a special way. But serving them. Here's the deal though, right? We know as parents, parenting is a service-oriented vocation, says Dr. Chet. If you're a parent, most likely you know what it is to serve. You do laundry, you do dishes, you do this, you make things, especially moms, a lot. And dads oftentimes will take on some of these as well, but moms especially seem to get a lot of they're serving and they're serving and they're serving. Here's where I'm going to offer a little bit of a suggestion. Don't get to the point where you do everything for them, though. Because in a way, that's actually not loving them well. If you're always doing everything for them. If they're 18 years old Hello? They can make their own bed. If they're 5, I think they can make their own bed. It may not look like the bed when you walk into the Hilton, but they can make their own bed. They can help out with some other chores. Okay? So here's something that I would encourage, especially if you have children in the home, especially younger children, but not just younger children, they can be teens as well. If there are both spouses in the house, I would encourage, get your child or children involved in serving the other, serving their parents, serving your spouse with you. Or maybe if you're in a single parent situation, get them involved in serving others. Help them to see what it is to serve others. Get their eyes off of themselves. And I think it's perfectly fine to give children chores. It's okay. You can teach them some good responsibility and to look at being part of a community. That's what a house is, right? It's just a small community. And that's why I think if we can't love those in our home, right, we're going to struggle loving those outside of the home. Because understanding community. Fourth one, receiving gifts. And this is the one that I actually was talking about earlier. Receiving gifts, and we're going to flip it around and talk about giving gifts. Giving gifts. So there are those that feel more loved when they receive gifts. And that's just something, hey, you're thinking of me. And when it comes to gifts, it's really important to know that it's the thought that counts. We've heard that before, right? It's the thought that counts, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. For God so loved the world, He what? Gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have eternal life. God so loved, He gave. That's the heart of love. At the core of love is this idea of generosity, of this idea of giving. And we'll talk more about giving and loving our community in a generous way, being generous to those around us, loving them by giving down the road. But thinking about loving those in the home by giving. And here's the thing. Some of you, I understand, I get it. You're like, we have very little money. We don't have like extra. Everything that we have goes to pay the bills. I get it. That's all right. You can still give. You can go, I think Dr. Chapman had this in one of his books, you can go around the neighborhood and find like a rock or a feather and give them a feather and say something along like the lines of you're the wind beneath my wings. I don't know if you want to do like that. And I definitely wouldn't suggest going into the neighbor and grabbing their grill and taking it to your husband and saying, baby, you really like my fire. I wouldn't suggest that. But you can find something like a rock or something small. Or when you're at the grocery store. One of the things that I love, receiving gifts isn't high on my list. And I'm kind of a little bit difficult at times. But she'll bring home honey buns once in a while. Be still my heart. I feel the love. It's the thought that counts. When you give the gift, essentially you're saying, I was thinking of you. I was thinking of you. If you buy me opera tickets, I'm thinking, you don't really love me. You don't know me very well. If you buy me tickets to country music, I'm thinking, what did I do to you? It's the thought that counts. And again, sometimes these will intersect. Years ago, Becky was working at what was then the Independent Bank. It's now Dr. Kramer's offices. And this was probably 16, 18 years ago or so. She was working at the bank. And it was a really, really windy day. But it was a Saturday morning. And I boy, you know what? I don't have a lot else going on. I want my wife to know that I love her, and so I went to the corner store and I bought a little box of donuts and some milk and juice for her, and she had another coworker that were there, and so I rode my bike. I think we only had one vehicle at the time, it's probably why. I rode my bike from the house, got to the corner store, and I was coming down the hill and everything, and the wind's just blowing, and I pulled into the drive-thru, and they're kind of chuckling, and I'm going, what's going on? I didn't realize, didn't know it at the time until they told me what was going on. I was coming down the hill with the donuts in hand, my hood up because the wind's blowing really hard. We were talking about it earlier in the week, and I was sharing the story with Celia, conveying the story to Celia, and I remember it a little bit differently. I remember it was a blizzard, and there's like a foot of snow. Becky's like, I don't think it was even that cold out, and there wasn't any snow, but the wind was blowing really hard. Anyway, so pull up to the drive-thru at the bank, and they're laughing, and their coworkers are like, what's going on? They proceed to tell me that when I was coming down the hill, my wife, who I love, says, who's that dork? The dork that rode his bike in the driving wind to give you donuts. She since then is done. You got to be careful of what I say. Because, you never know. Again. Okay, we survived. A little fender bender. Just call me a dork. But acts of service, receiving gifts, and even words of affirmation. Jesus gave. God the Father gave us. A heart of love. The last one, quality time. Quality time. Quality time combines the two commodities that are so valuable. You and time. In our society, time is definitely a commodity, something that is very precious to most. Something that most of us seem to have very little of, right? I just need more time. I never have enough time today. I guess it gets squeezed out oftentimes. Those are really good. So quality time. Luke chapter 5 verse 16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, first and foremost, I want us to see in this that Jesus is setting an example, and he's letting us know if Jesus saw that it was that important to get alone and to pray and to seek God the Father, how much more should we? Jesus was 100% God and 100% man. We're 0% God and 100% humanity. How much more do we need God the Father? But there's something else in this that we see that Jesus is demonstrating and helping with. He withdrew. He was intentional about getting away. He was intentional about carving out some space and time to focus on the one whom he loves. And especially as spouses, as parents, we need to do likewise. We need to be very intentional about carving out some space, some time to focus on those we love, we would say, the most. But oftentimes, again, they get pushed out and they don't get our time. And they don't get our undivided time. He got away from distractions so he could focus. It may not work for you. I don't understand. I don't know all of your situations, but something that Becky and I have done, especially in the last 2-3 months, as we started setting aside, it's not always the same day. Kind of depends. My schedule bounces around. I know some of you think I just work on Sundays, but my schedule does bounce around a little bit, and I don't always have the same free day or whatever. And I like for it to not just be on my day off. I like for it to be during the week, where I'll take the lunch a little earlier, and we'll go, and usually we'll go to Marlette, and we'll have Chinese together, and it's usually really nice, because there's almost nobody else there. When we get there about 11:30 or whatever, don't crash my car. And we can focus. We spend time with a man talking on the way over. It's just us two at the meal. And then we can spend some time, and we'll bring Sela something home for lunch on the way back. But we can just focus on each other, and sometimes we don't always get that in the evenings. My evenings can have, at times can fill up. And so something that we've tried to do is to be very intentional. And maybe that, again, that doesn't work. Find something though. Again, it goes back to one of the key words of our big idea, intentional. Intentionally fill your home, your house, with love. And you've got to do it by carving out and making sure that there's quality time. There's time for you and me, doing something that hopefully that both of you can enjoy. Something that both of you can find special. And again, it doesn't cost money to do this. You don't have to spend money. But you have to be intentional about setting aside time and space to focus on one another, to talk, to interact. We need to do that as spouses. Parents, we definitely need to be doing that with our children. So a couple things I want to close with. One, learn to ask good questions. Learn to ask good questions. Questions that can't be answered with just a yes or a no. Learn to ask good questions. What was your favorite thing to do at school today? Or you might even maybe go with this. This isn't original with me. What made you mad? What made you sad? What made you glad? Talk through that. But especially as your children get older, be aware and make sure that it's not feeling like 20 questions or that they're being interrogated. Make sure that they're understanding and that they're able to receive it as I trust that you would want it to be received, that you're asking because you care about them. And you want them to know that you want to know what's going on in their lives, what they're going through, what they're thinking, what their dreams are, their aspirations. Okay? So learn to ask good questions. Second of all, learn to listen well. I think one of the things that we really struggle at in our society is listening. Oftentimes we're listening, we're just waiting, we're listening almost more so than just saying what we want to say. We're thinking of our response. We're not even really thinking through and asking them for more clarity. We're just building our response. And again, that's one of the things that will lead to accidents in the home. Is when we don't listen. So learn to ask good questions and learn to listen. So as we wrap up on this, what's one of these five? I want you to work on all five, but what's one of the five that you're going to pay a special attention to this week? One of the five, and then list that. Again, choose to intentionally fill your home with love. I want to tie something in. It doesn't naturally fit, and I understand that. But as I looked at this series, there are some things that I believe God was saying we need to be looking at as followers of Jesus Christ, as those that are called to love one another, those that are called to make a difference in our community, and some of the different things that we can be a part in making a difference in our community and demonstrating love to our community. And one of the things that I feel strongly about, and I understand not all are called to this, and some should stay far away from it. Okay? But I do want to encourage you, especially as God directs. I got one of the three that are listed there at the bottom of your teaching notes. That maybe you could fill your home with those that need to receive God's love. Maybe God will call on you, and maybe you're at a point where you're empty nesters, where your children are older or whatever, you're just at a stage in life, and God would say, now would be the time for you to open your home and be a foster parent, foster parents. Have a child or children be able to come into your home that needs a safe place where they can receive the different kinds of love that we talked about today. That oftentimes they hadn't been received. The other one that I've had, I believe all three of the emails, or websites, I should say, that I provided on the teaching notes, also adoption. One of the greatest ways that we can share the love of Christ is by opening our home to those that haven't had that kind of a home, whether it's through foster care or through adoption. And again, I realize not everybody's called to that. At this point, God doesn't have that on our radar. So I realize it's not for everybody, but I do believe that there could be some that God is saying, you need to open up your home. And love some children, love a boy, love a girl, love a set of siblings. I'm amazed, take my hat off to a number of families that have been a part of this congregation over the years that have done just that. I've walked with some of them on their journey, and I know that there are many times where it's very difficult, so again, it's not for everybody. And understand this, right? We do, right? Love isn't always easy. But if God's calling you to do that, there are a few resources, there are others available. I would encourage you to take a look at that. And to fill your home with those that need the love that we've talked about today. You need to receive God's love. I'm going to invite our praise team to make their way back to the platform, and invite the ushers to make their way forward as well. We're going to worship the Lord through a couple more songs. I'm going to give you a heads up. I'll come back up after the first song, and then we're going to have a special time of prayer today, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I do want to say, at any time, it doesn't always get announced usually, but anytime you feel drawn to the Lord in prayer, you feel like you need to take something to God in prayer, if you want to come to the altar to do that, please know